So Hungary was really excited because just within the last few years, they got a stake. Hungary was actually opened. There was a dedicatory prayer in 1987, and then it was opened a few years after that. So compared to many other countries, it's really young, really, really new to the gospel. But there's a stake, and it's centered in Budapest, in the capital. And there's a stake center in Pest, on the Pest side. And then everywhere else outside of that are branches. So there are various cities outside that are branches, and that's overseen by the mission president. So because of that, in some areas you'll have a full primary, young women's, young men's, and in other areas you may have one child in primary, or you may have a much smaller priesthood group. But that gives the opportunity for missionaries to really learn how the church should function and help teach the members basic things. Like I remember teaching our little branch about visiting teaching. They'd never heard of it, no idea what it was. But teaching why it's important to them helped me understand a little bit more why it's important. Because I saw if they really were to do it, how much it would bless their lives. Same with, I remember when the first calling was given in a branch, and someone was called to be in the young women's presidency. She was scared to death. Her name was Ava. And she was so scared, but she did so well. And it was just great to see her progression as she had the faith to accept that calling and then another. And that's where the church is right now. Many people haven't seen a temple. They haven't been to the temple yet. Many have, but many of the new converts haven't because it's 18 hours away in Germany. And so because of that, the people really have to have a lot more faith. But the branches are there, and they're strong, and they're growing, and the people have a lot of courage to live the gospel.
The missionary count definitely shot up after the call was made for sisters to go earlier on missions, and I mean for elders to go younger. So there was definitely a huge expanded missionary work in Hungary after that happened. And so the people needed it in Hungary. I mean, I'm sure they needed it all around the world, but Hungary definitely needed more missionaries, just because a lot of things are really weak there. We did a lot of less active work, and so there are a lot of people that had gotten baptized. I think in one of my areas there's like 300 or 400 people that were baptized, but only 30 or 40 came to church. So we worked with a lot of less actives. And the priesthood was really weak in most of the areas I served in. It was really tough for a lot of people. And I mean, you think about living in that kind of environment, and you know, it's a completely different culture, completely different values and things like that. And it's really tough for some people, especially right after baptism. You know, they're like, yeah, you know, they're really excited about it. They know they want to be a member of the church, you know, but it's just really hard for them. You know, law of chastity, the word of wisdom, those things are really tough for people because they just grew up with their parents doing that stuff. They grew up with their friends doing it. They never really cared. I remember talking to a lot of people that I would ask them if they ever thought about where they would go after this life, and a lot of them would say that they didn't even really think about it until I talked to them about it on the street or tracting or whatever. So it's just really, really interesting. You think about that, and you're really in a different place. And so, yeah, it's really hard for the members to, you know, get going. And there's not a whole lot of support within the branches just because there's not a whole lot of members. But the members that are there, they really, really try as hard as they can. But I mean, there's a lot of people that come to church, but then if you look at the people in each ward that actually really go out of their way to, you know, do member missionary work and all that stuff, it's really hard. But they do it. They do. And that was, I think, the best way that missionary work could be done in Hungary. I mean, tracting's great, streeting's great, but member missionary work was always just boom. Like whenever we would get somebody to teach from a member, they were always either super close to baptism or baptized. There was never really any dog programs. There's never anything like that. So member missionary work is something that has to has to improve in Hungary. I mean, anywhere in the world. It's really cool to talk to older missionaries because, for example, Dunói Város, that's one area that was huge back in the day. They call it the City of Gold. The missionaries call it the City of Gold because, I mean, if you went there, it was like, wow, you're in Duna, that's the best place you could be. The church members are super nice there. They're really cool, you know, they're strong. But I mean, that was what I think I talked to a missionary that served there in like the 90s, I think like 96 or 97. And it's not like that anymore. Dunói Város is one of the branches that's actually struggling the most right now in Hungary. Because it's up and down all the time. People move out. You know, people just can't take it anymore. So they stop coming to church, they become inactive. So it moves up and down a lot in Hungary. But it is getting to where they almost have a second stake. So work is growing really, really rapidly in Hungary as well. And it was really cool to see before I left. There was just so much happening. There's so much excitement in Hungary for the new stake and for, you know, possibly getting a temple really soon because they have that second stake. And once they have that second stake, they will have a new temple. And I think they almost have enough priesthood holders right now to have one. And so, I mean, they have to travel really far. They have to go all the way to Freiburg, Germany just to go to the temple and do endowments and stuff like that. So there's always planned trips to go to the temple and, you know, do baptisms for the dead and, you know, get your endowment, get married in the temple. Most people in Hungary, they get married and then they wait a year and then they go to Freiburg. That's usually what they do. So it's just a lot different. The church is doing really well in Hungary, and things are really, really picking up really fast.
Hungary is a Roman Catholic country, so a lot of people, if they're religious, a lot of them are Catholic. Before the World Wars, that was the case. After World War II, World War I, World War II, they were kind of taken over by the communists, and it was kind of looked down upon to be religious. A lot of people kind of backed away from that. And before that, because of communism, the church wasn't able to send missionaries in there. So in 1990 or 1991, communism left and the church was officially invited to bring missionaries into Hungary. So the church has only been in Hungary for like 25 years, so it's relatively new, relatively small. And it just started out in Budapest. That was the only area, and there was quite a few missionaries just right in Budapest, just trying to start that work. So branches right now, so it started out just with one branch in Budapest, or units, I guess. Right now there are 20-something units, I want to say 23 or 24 units. Most of them are just branches. Right now there's 3 wards in Budapest, and then one other ward in a city called Kecskemét, but all the other ones are just branches. Some of them are pretty close to being wards, which is exciting. But again, it's still, the church is in its youth over in Hungary. It's actually a pretty small mission. The mission boundaries are only Hungary. There isn't a temple there. All the members usually go to Freiburg. Right now the Freiburg temple is closed, and so they were going to Frankfurt, Germany. And that one was closed for a while for renovation. So then their closest one was Bern, Switzerland. So they have to travel quite a bit to go to the temple. It's kind of a sacrifice. They go for a week at a time, but they always have a wonderful experience with that. Again, it's a small mission. We never got above 100 missionaries. In some of the units, there's only 2 missionaries. In some of the units in Budapest, there's 6 or 8. So it just depends on where you are. But it was kind of cool just being in a smaller mission. You get to know the missionaries a lot better. So I loved it. So I served from March 2013 to December 2014, January 2015. And I started off in Pécs in the southwest, very southwest city. And then I went north to Veszprém, and then east to Székesfehérvár, and then all the way over to the east to Békéscsaba. After Békés Csaba, I went back over to the northwest to Tatabánya, and then back over to the east to Miskolc, and then my last area was in Kispest, which is an area of Budapest. So I got to serve in every single zone, which was really cool. Got to see the whole country, and loved each zone, loved each part of Hungary, and I'm grateful for. I'd never had a bad area that I served in. There were areas that were kind of like looked down upon by missionaries, but every area has its kind of silver lining, the awesome part of that area. So it was fun to be able to find out what makes that area so great. So I mentioned how communism was in there, and then right after communism left, Hungary was open to churches, and right then a lot of churches came in, and it was really confusing to a lot of them. A lot of them joined churches that they later left because they realized, oh, I joined this church too quickly, and that's sort of been the history since then. Churches come in and see if Hungary's ready for them. So a lot of times they're just pretty closed off at first. A lot of them have a very strong feel towards their ancestry and towards being Catholic, which is true in a lot of Catholic countries. Preconceived notions about the church, a lot of them have heard of Mormons, but a lot of them are kind of confused about who the Mormons are. A lot of them have heard about polygamy, so they believe that, we're polygamists and that we've never changed. So I've had a lot of discussions about that. A lot of them also think that we are similar to the Amish and that we don't use electricity, that we're very, very old-fashioned. And that comes from a number of sources, a number of random documentaries, old documentaries in Hungary that have mentioned the Mormons with the Amish or whatever. But I also ran into a lot of people that had heard nothing about the Mormons or the LDS Church, and that was really cool to see, or to be able to teach people right from the very start. They're a blank slate as far as the church is concerned.